Our next panel discussion, the impact of the new administration on the automotive industry, presented by Alliance for Automotive Innovation.
All right, thank you.
Thanks. All right, check. Can you hear us? We can hear. Okay.
Yes.
Well, that's an act to follow there, the governor.
No doubt about it.
Okay, well, thanks for spending some time with us, John.
Happy to be here.
I get up every morning thinking about this industry. So do you. So thank you to you and your team for coming to Detroit, for the work you do on behalf of Detroit and Michigan with the Innovation Alliance. I don't think a lot of people know who you are and what you do. So let's set the table with that.
Great. Well, thank you, Glenn. Good to be here. Yeah, we have a tough act to follow. I thought the governor was thoughtful and recognized the critical importance of the auto industry to our economy and to our national security. This is what we do. So I lead an organization called Alliance for Automotive Innovation. We are America's Automotive Trade Association. We're based in Washington, D.C. We work at the intersection of automotive innovation and public policy. That's what we do. The governor used the term automotive ecosystem, and I think that's a great term for the industry we represent. We represent auto manufacturers, the iconic companies that build the cars sitting right in front of us. We represent tier one suppliers and tech companies and computer chipset manufacturers, software developers, everybody and anybody that is doing innovation in the automotive space. And so that's who we are, that's what we do, and you're absolutely right. Sometimes I wake up in the middle of the night, sometimes I wake up first thing in the morning, but every time I wake up, it's all about this industry.
So you hear this discussion about the industry in transition. The governor talked about that too. We hit a lot of inflection points, and we're about to hit a big one in 5 days with 45 becoming 47. And this is significant because we know that things are going to be different with this administration. So just your general thoughts about what we're going to be, I don't want to say up against, but what we're going to be working with.
Yeah, I think it's a great question, and of course, as you point out, a timely question. On Monday at noon, everything changes. So first of all, this happens every 4 years or every 8 years. As an industry, I'm happy to say, and not just the association, but as an industry, we're used to and we're built to work with everybody. It's what we do. We work on both sides of the aisle, we work across the aisle, and we're about the health and the competitiveness of the automotive industry. So let me start there. I think that this incoming administration and the new Congress understand that a competitive and healthy automotive industry is critical to our economic and national security. And so I start with a bit of a sense of optimism because this is really what it's all about. And so if the policy discussions are about our competitiveness and about our ability to compete with China and others in an intense competition for auto assets and automotive investments, then we're going to be in a good place. Doesn't mean we're always going to agree with the administration or the Congress in the direction that they want to go. Look, there's a lot of competition for scarce resources and a lot of different views about how we achieve a competitive auto industry. But that's our job, is to help navigate that, to provide insight and perspective about what it takes to be competitive.
And to set the stage, you wrote a letter
Yes.
to President Trump. I read the letter, but most people don't know what was in the letter. What were you trying to drive home?
Yeah, so again, what I said to the president-elect, first of all, I congratulated him on his win. And then what the letter talks about is, first, it starts with this idea of competitiveness. And I listened very carefully on the campaign trail. And what I heard the president-elect focus on was competitiveness, on consumer choice, on opportunity for making the United States a platform for automotive investment so that we're competitive. You know, a lot of people don't recognize, of course, people in Michigan know this, not only do we build cars and trucks here in America for American consumers, but we export almost 2 million vehicles built by Americans in American plants to countries all around the world. That's cutting edge, and we need to make sure that we can maintain that. And so the letter starts with this idea of competitiveness. Then what we talk about is, look, we need to have some balance and a rational approach to regulation. We can't have regulation that gets too far ahead of the customer. The customer is ultimately in charge. So there needs to be a recognition that we have to make progress on emissions, that we have to continue to develop cutting-edge safety technologies, and at the same time have a balance to ensure that we're competitive. And so those are the key themes about the letter, in the letter. And we've been very fortunate to have good dialogue with the transition teams and the folks engaged in building the new administration across the agencies, and so that's what we're doing.
Good.
And that's what the letter says.
Well, I've talked to some people. I'm not a wonk. I do watch The West Wing. So I think that this administration, even though he's been president, is going to be very different. He's been there. He understands D.C., he's going to be there for a finite amount of time. What are your thoughts about how this is different?
Oh yeah, such a great question. What I'm seeing, I'll just tell you what I'm seeing. This is a transition that is going much more quickly than the transition in 2016. There's no question about that. They are ready, they're engaged, they have a game plan. I think the second thing, and you touched on this, is important to recognize, 4 years. So this is the second term for President Trump, and so he's got a finite amount of time, meaning 4 years. The way Washington works, it's almost a shorter period of time than that. Right. He's got between the inaugural next Monday and effectively the midterm elections 2 years from now. So this is going to be an incredibly active period in 2025 and into early 2026, where a lot is going to happen. Think about it. There is a need to review expiring tax policy. There's going to be a debate about competitiveness. The USMCA, in other words, the North American free trade dynamic that we've been comfortable with for the better part of 27 years now and was reformed under the first Trump administration, is going to be reviewed early in 2026 and probably before that. And so a lot is going to happen in a very, very short amount of time, almost all of it having a significant impact on the industry.
Next week's going to be busy.
Next week is going to, well, it's from my mind, it's been busy since before the election. But yes, next week is going to be incredibly active, right? And Congress is already up and running. So yeah.
They are. So we're going to talk about some of the specific issues, but one of the things I want to touch on, and I know that many of the audience here have been to China. I was telling you when we talked that I remember visiting BYD personally in Shenzhen about 12 or 13 years ago. And what I saw that day in Shenzhen was nothing to write home about. But that's dramatically changed. You just got back from China and Eastern Europe. What did you see, but what do you feel, and what do you want people to know?
Yeah, it's great. I want to touch on Eastern Europe first, and then get to China, because China is frankly a bigger, more strategic discussion. But first, Eastern Europe. Yeah, I was in Romania, I was in Hungary. If you look at what's happening in the European auto industry, Central and Eastern Europe is to the European auto industry what Mexico is to the North American auto industry. It is low-cost, low-value manufacturing that is supporting the auto industrial base across Europe. And so just it's important to recognize that. Also, you're seeing Chinese investment in Europe, as Governor Whitmer mentioned, and a lot of that in Central and Eastern Europe, like Hungary, for example. And so I think it's just sort of an interesting parallel to keep in mind. Competitiveness often involves thinking about a regional approach, and that's why, in our case, North America is important. Okay, so now to China. It's extraordinary what's happening there. I had a chance to drive, 50 or so vehicles. Vehicles built by joint venture companies, vehicles built by China companies, and it's extraordinary the state of technology there. A lot of people focus on electrification. Wow, there's almost, they're almost at 50% electrified market share. Yeah, that's true. To me, the most transformational thing about vehicles in the marketplace is a completely seamless digital experience for the customer. And it is absolutely extraordinary. It is, customers are now focused on this digital experience in a way that I think customers are not quite as focused on here yet in the US. 3 things that I took away from my experience there: speed to market with regard to development, vertical integration. There's a lot of vertical integration for the OEMs there. And yes, subsidy, no question about that. And so it's really important for us as an auto industry to be focused on competitiveness. We had a board meeting in December, and one of our C-suite executives who's on our board, I'm not going to mention him by name because he might be hearing my voice, made the following point when we were engaged with policymakers at our board meeting. We have to both protect the industry, but also promote the industry. We've got to be thoughtful about policy and actions within the industry to make sure that we continue to be more competitive. That, to me, was the biggest lesson that I took away from my experience in China.
I love those words you just used, because that's Mish Auto, our organization's mantra: protect, retain, and grow. So when you look at Michigan, and you know this industry, and you've been here and worked for companies here, we're in the middle of it. Do you think people understand how fast things are changing and what's coming? I mean, I describe for people just the Chinese capacity. You know, there's roughly 85 million units bought or sold every year in the globe, and they can produce half of that right now. 10 to 15 of that is not even intended for this market. I mean, those are staggering numbers. Do we know what's coming?
Yeah, that's a loaded question because I'm quite confident that some people here do. No,
I agree.
But I don't think that enough of us know, and I
particularly
think
as we go into the supplier ranks.
100%.
Okay.
I mean, and we need to have an honest and open discussion about this within the industry,
okay,
and then with policymakers, because I do think we have to have more of a sense of urgency about this need to be globally competitive. And I also think that it's important for us to be thinking about what consumers think about mobility in places like China, because those products will get here at some point, right? So people talk about, well, there's going to be tariffs, and there's national security protections now against Chinese technology or technology from other potential foreign adversaries. Yes, that's true. The question is, what are you going to do? What are we as an industry going to do with the time that affords us?
Right.
And that is all about retaining our competitive edge, enhancing our competitive edge where we may not have a lead, and really, really focusing on being globally competitive. It is absolutely essential we do it. We need to do it with a sense of urgency.
I was talking with a friend of mine after breakfast who works in the industry, and he was working with one of the OEMs, and I said, we were talking about speed, and I said, well, what did you tell him? He said, you're not moving fast enough. And then he said, that's all I wanted to know, is you're not moving fast enough. So let's break these issues down a little bit. Let's talk about tariffs. But there are different components to tariffs, and there's different countries being bantered around right now. The governor mentioned some of those. So talk about Canada, Mexico, and then China.
Yeah, tariffs. Yeah, it's like, oh, what do you think about tariffs? It depends. Right. There's no such thing as one view about tariffs. Tariffs are a tool. They are a tool. They're an economic tool in terms of how we manage our international commerce, and frankly, I would argue, our foreign policy. And so you have to think of it in terms of a tool. Okay, how would that tool be appropriately utilized? You mentioned China. China, as you mentioned, has 50 million units of Chinese production capacity. They consume about 25 million units of that capacity. They export about 5 million units. So there's like 15, 20 million units of excess capacity that has to go somewhere. If that capacity moves into the US market in a way that's anti-competitive, people would refer to that informally as dumping. I think a tariff response to anti-competitive behavior is appropriate, right? And so that's a way that tariffs, can be used. You look at now at Canada, Mexico, we've had seamless free trade among Canada, Mexico, and the US now for over a quarter of a century, as I mentioned a few minutes ago. Unwinding that through tariffs would be counterproductive. Why? Because automotive free trade in North America supports American jobs, supports vehicle choice in America, and supports vehicle affordability in America. It is a winning formula for the US consumers and for the US auto industry. Can it be changed? Of course it can. Should it be reviewed? It's going to be. And so I think that's really important, right? But we have to retain this as a fundamental competitive vehicle platform. So people say, well, President-elect has suggested there be tariffs in Canada and Mexico. I haven't seen a proposal yet. I'm not sure what his thinking is. He's the president. He's gonna, he'll make a proposal, and we'll react to it, and we will be as informative as we possibly can be in that debate. But I also recognize that border security is important. There are other elements to this discussion, right? But I think I would distinguish importantly from tariffs designed to address anti-competitive behavior and tariffs on our trading partners, which probably would serve a different purpose, and so I'd be a little bit more worried about those.
Okay, let's shift to this word that gets thrown around a lot, mandates. But I know this audience is pretty well educated, but I don't think a lot of people understand there are really two sets of states that are operating with different rules, and some do have mandates. So maybe give a little primer on that, and then your thoughts.
Yeah. So, I mean, now we enter into what I would call crazy land. The United States is the only auto market in the world that regulates one tailpipe with 4 different agencies and 7 different rules. Think about that. One tailpipe, 4 agencies, 7 different rules, 4 of them at the federal level, 3 of them at the state level. Okay, so it's even before it gets complicated, it's complicated. So what do we have? At the federal level, we have what I would call a performance standard. You got to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, in terms of grams per mile. You can use roughly any technology that you want. Although obviously the further down, the more stringent that regulation becomes, the more you need advanced technologies. But that's how it works. We also have a state requirement that California sets that 10 other states follow, which roughly makes up about 1/3 of the automotive market, that is truly setting a mandate. It is on the road to a ban of internal combustion engines. Next year in California and New York and several other states, they have to be at 35% EV share. California's at 25%. New York, 10. Like, are they going to get from 10% to 35% in this calendar year because it's model year based, 2026? Not a chance. So that type of mandate's going to create distortions in the market. It's going to create higher prices. It's going to send New Yorkers to Pennsylvania to buy their vehicles. That's the true mandate, and we have to try and figure out how to make better sense out of that, right? So the Biden administration just gave California a permission slip to put this program in place. These other states are following it. I think we got to fix that.
There was some signaling yesterday out of DC that might be pretty quick on the agenda here coming up, that we're going to hear something next week.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think that, and we saw this in the first Trump administration,
right,
where President Trump revoked this permission slip for California to do what they wanted to do in the old Advanced Clean Car program. California challenged that ruling in court, and so we're going to see probably a similar pattern. The challenge for automakers and suppliers is that sort of process doesn't completely eliminate compliance risk. So, the industry's caught in this ping-ponging sort of place, and so we need a more rational approach when it comes to those, those state requirements.
Okay. I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about the most important asset of all, and that's our people. So one of the things, as you know, that we work on is developing more high-tech talent for the industry, growing it here in Michigan, keeping it here, but every state, every province, every region has the same issue. When you look around and you see what's in that hall with everyone's personal cars through Modded Detroit, or you go up on the floor and you see, we are looking at the most high-tech consumer product on the face of the earth. It's tech, it's cool. Are we translating that image and perception to the people we need to work in the industry, and what could we be doing more of?
Yeah, that is such an important question, because really this is tech. When I sit around our board table and I look at the industry leaders around that table, it is technology leadership, right? So, whether it's OEM companies, whether it's auto manufacturers, or it's suppliers, or it's battery manufacturers, it's all technology. I think we can do a better job of telling that story, that this is absolutely cutting-edge technology. Here's the thought experiment. Take this industry out of the picture. Just take it out of the picture. Imagine it didn't exist anymore. How comfortable would you be about the future of the US economy? How comfortable would you be about the ability of this country to defend itself? And if you have questions about that, then you realize how important a cutting-edge, high-tech auto industry is. And I think that's the story that we can continue to tell. This is absolutely a great time to be in this industry. Transformational time. Look, I don't know about you, but I want to stick around to see how it turns out, because there's a lot at stake, but there's so much opportunity and so much upside as we continue this path of merging of mobility and technology.
Right. Well, I know we've got a lot of students. I can see some sitting up on top there. I hope that they see the same thing too when they look at the show. So let's talk about the show, because you've been doing it for many, many years. I was telling somebody the other day about the cattle drive down Jefferson.
I was just going to tell that story.
And they said, the cattle drive down Jefferson, what are you talking about? So, but those days are gone. Those are great days, but those days are gone. And I think one of the things that we struggle with sometimes is wanting things to be the same and not change, and trying to force ourselves through that inflection point. But the show has gone through that. We're back in January. I've been down here quite a bit. What do you see? How do you feel about it? And what do you want DC and everyone else to know about Detroit and what we're doing here?
Yeah, first of all, the cattle drive. I was at Chrysler when that was the rebranding of the Ram.
Yep.
And yes, 100 head of cattle coming down Jefferson Avenue toward the convention center.
Cowboys on horseback.
Absolute insanity. To me, that was the high point of old school auto shows, right? We'll probably never see anything like that again. But I was telling a colleague of mine as we walked around the show yesterday, what's very different and very exciting about the show is there are cars in motion on the show floor.
Yeah.
Right? So there might have been a lot of cattle running down Jefferson Avenue, but everything, all of the displays were static then. You could touch the car and you could open the doors. You go on the floor now and you can get inside. I won't name one vehicle, that goes really fast, because then I'll have to name all the vehicles because I represent all the companies. But you can sit in the passenger seat of a high-tech EV and have your head pushed back against the headrest. You're going to have the experience of moving in a vehicle. And I think that type of reimagination is going to be really, really, it's going to resonate with people, right? Because cars are meant to be experienced in motion. They're not static devices. They're gorgeous and beautiful, and they are in many ways design pieces, but they're meant to be experienced in motion. And so seeing that on the floor, whether it's the experience in the rugged off-road vehicles, the Bronco experience or the Jeep experience, or experiencing all of those EV ride and drive opportunities is really the way I think shows should be now.
Yeah, I think they've done a really good mix. And again, you can see consumers and you can see the vehicles. And I love that we have GM, Toyota, and Stellantis and Ford all here. There are 26 OEMs in Southeast Michigan now. There's nothing like it in the world. And this is our show.
Yeah.
And I think we have a lot to build on here. So I just want to thank you for being here today. Thanks for the work you do. We love working with your team. And a round of applause for John, and thank his team for supporting it today. And have a great time at the show.
Thank you, Glenn, and thanks for your leadership.
All right, man.
Appreciate it.